Hi there, folks. Welcome to the A Minute to Midnite Show. This is Tony coming to you from New Zealand, and with me today I have Eric Stogner in Georgia, USA. And Eric, it's good to have you back.
Likewise, good to talk to you, Tony.
There's a lot we can discuss today, and I think there's a lot that people will need to really hear, because I think there's so much deception out there at the moment, which many people are falling to in one way or another. Wouldn't you agree, Eric?
Yes, and we have to remember, no matter what topic we're covering, that is the very first words out of Jesus's mouth, right? Beware that you be not deceived. So whatever we're encountering, we have to be on the alert for deception. That's why it's good to question things and think twice and pray about what we see and hear.
Absolutely. So I just want to kick off a little bit about an event that's happening in Washington, D.C. from the 9th to the 12th. It's called, it's on the National Mall, and it's called Communion America. 50 tents of non-stop worship, one tent for every state, with thousands of worshippers, prayer, gospel proclamation, and commissioning every night. And on the third day, they are due to have the longest communion table in history, spanning the National Mall. It is time for authenticity, vulnerability, and connection. This is from their own words. It is the vision of, and this is my words, and has been organised by Lou Engle and is sponsored by Awaken the Dawn. It's also being promoted by people like Bill Johnson, who's a NAR proponent, and many others. Bill Johnson from Bethel Church. As far as Lou Engle go, he's the main guy organising this. Back in 2016, was a self-proclaimed NAR prophet, apostle. Lou Engle, he basically, I'll just read something from an article here. There's quite a lot in it, but he met with Catholic leaders and different things, and at the end, after effusive mutual expressions of unity and forgiveness, the Pope's delegate and Lou Engle kissed each other's feet before the gathered masses and the world, proclaiming a holy moment, ending the diabolical sin of division between Catholics and Protestants. The papal delegates proclaimed, Jesus doesn't care about our differences in doctrine. We must fly united. And so that was Lou Engle kissing this Pope's man's feet back in 2016. And Lou Engle is the main guy organising this Communion USA event, which, will span a mile-long communion table with all these religion, Catholics, Protestants uniting, all these different Seven Mountains Mandate people and all of that, the NAR elites and so on at this event in Washington, D.C. So this is a big pushing for the one world religion, I feel like. And as Christians, it can be confusing for people, because these people, have some right doctrine and some wrong doctrine. And some of it's very destructive. And I believe Satan wants to usurp Christianity to get us into that one world religion. And so people need to really put their discernment on. And hopefully this show will help people see some of the deception. So I've got a ton more I can say. I'll just throw it to you, Eric, before I continue.
I mean, that is rather incredible. When you read it that way and hear a mile-long communion table and the focus on the Catholic Church, which we know Catholic is a word that means universal.
Yeah.
They always consider themselves the mother church, and everything stems and flows through them. And I think what we're seeing is this desire to have it all come back together. I'm trying to remember, wasn't it a few years ago, there was some gathering, maybe it was in the UK or maybe in the US, where basically a number of Protestant leaders were gathering together, and they were kind of declaring an end to basically protesting Protestantism.
Yes.
In other words,
yeah.
We're going to bury our differences and let's all get united again.
Yeah, that was with people like Kenneth Copeland involved and all of that. Yeah, absolutely. That was, I think that was in the US, and they had a Catholic man there, and Kenneth Copeland was patting him on the shoulder, and at that point, Copeland said that, Pope Francis is one of his most favourite people and all of that. So we have a different Pope now, but the same concept still. So I'll just continue a little bit more. So I've previously covered in other videos that the founder of the New Age movement, Alice A. Bailey, wrote of the hierarchy of light. She believes they're ascended masters, but I believe they're fallen angels and demons. And well, what's really interesting, like for people that will cover a little bit here, the Seven Mountains mandate, because there's an awful lot of this going on in Christian circles and at this event and Turning Point USA and so on. But there's also Alice Bailey and the New Age movement had their own version of the Seven Mountains. And I'll just continue. I'll just read a bit more. This is just my notes, but so I don't forget anything, I might just read from my own notes. So Alice Bailey wrote of the hierarchy of light, who she believes to be ascended masters, but I say, like, I believe they're fallen angels anyway.
Right.
She said that progressive thinkers would have influence in 7 areas of planetary life. And those areas were politics, education, religion, art, science, psychology, and economics. In other words, they're basically the same 7 mountains that the Christians are pushing. So a popular dominionist heresy is the Seven Mountains mandate, pushing similar areas to what the New Ages were pushing. And what the Seven Mountains mandate people believe is that the Christians need to basically almost control the world, have influence in these 7 mountains areas, 7 areas, and have them under dominion before Jesus returns, which is completely unbiblical. It absolutely is unbiblical. I'll go in a little bit more, but I'll throw it to you for any comments you might have right now, Eric.
Oh, yeah. I mean, all of this is something we should pay close attention to because, I mean, isn't it convenient now that the new Pope is American?
Yeah.
And so now,
absolutely.
There'll be a lot more going on in the English language, of course, even though I gather he's fluent in multiple languages, but here in America. So it's almost fitting that there's this mile-long Eucharist or whatever going on in our capital. Also notice all the tie-ins that Trump has had with the Catholic Church. He's had priests at his home in Mar-a-Lago, Florida. He's blessed a lot of Catholic events, spoken at Jesuit schools. He attended a Jesuit school himself. And really, I mean, that's another whole category to look into. Who and what are and were the Jesuits? You talk about if you're going to influence 7 areas of power and influence in the world, then you would need influencers. You would need people to come in and infiltrate and essentially rise the ranks so that when the time came for all these things to come together, everything, every area, every field, and like we've seen World Economic Forum, every leader in every country would have influencers in the right place so that when someone says snap to and come to attention, we're doing this big thing, they'll all work in unison. Yeah.
Absolutely, and I will actually get into a little bit of that too shortly. You've touched on a very important area. So back with the Seven Mountains mandate, okay, in 2013, I'm just reading from my notes again, sorry, just so I don't forget anything. Lance Wallnau and Bill Johnson of Bethel together wrote and published a book titled Invading Babylon, the Seven Mountains Mandate. Lance Wallnau, who I feel is one of the worst of the NAR pastors and a big proponent of the Seven Mountains Mandate. Remember, he's the guy that wrote a book where he claimed that Donald Trump was King Cyrus, a King Cyrus type before the 2016 election. And Lance Wallnau's book and his whole Seven Mountains Mandate and Donald Trump was a big thing that pushed Trump into the 2016 presidency. Got a lot of people voting, a lot of Christians voting for Trump. So anyway, Lance Wallnau and Charlie Kirk have teamed up on a lot of different platforms, including podcasts. So, and actually, I don't want to, I'm not here to bag Charlie Kirk. I mean, the man's, had a lot of good things to say. I don't agree with a lot of his doctrine. And this is the truth is very hard to find, and it's very easy to have a little bit of lie mixed in with a lot of truth, and it dilutes the whole thing. But so in 2024, Charlie Kirk and Lance Wallnau partnered up, to push for Trump. And the partnership, which Lance Wallnau referred to as the Courage Tour, sought to spur conservative churches directly into the political arena backing Trump. And in his podcast, Lance Wallnau described that he had been counseling Charlie Kirk. And Wallnau said, "I call him up regularly and cheer him on because he's attacked as the face of Christian nationalism." There we go. Those conversations precipitated the current partnership. "We're going to join Charlie, and Charlie's joining with us," Lance Wallnau said. So Christian nationalism, Christian nationalism is not the same as Christianity, and this is what's confusing for a lot of people.
Right. And at a societal level, it's one thing to get people motivated for personal reasons or for nationalistic reasons, but if you can get them wrapped around their religious beliefs, then you can really grab their hearts along with their minds. And so, it's almost not surprising that they're wanting to motivate people based on their faith. And then, Christian nationalism, what even is that? When you think of Scripture, I just think of Jesus saying, "Well, show me a coin. Whose image is on this coin? Caesar's. Render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, and unto God what is God's." I think that was a way of saying, we're not here to get involved in taxation and government and that kind of thing. And in fact, later when Jesus was, being evaluated and questioned by Pilate, he mocked him and said, "Who are you? Are you really the king of the Jews? And who are you?" And, he basically said, "If this were my kingdom, I would have, my people would rise up, but my kingdom is not of this world." And likewise, a lot of his followers were disgruntled when he revealed, "No, I'm not coming here to overthrow your Roman authorities. I know you thought I was. That's not my plan. My plan is to really change the location of where your faith is lived out from the external behaviors from the heart." So all these ideas of we should turn this nation, turn this world around. We're going to use Christianity to do it. That's not really what Jesus came to say and do. And it's funny, I think we've even talked on previous shows how there's even some people out there that admit they're not Christians, and then they'll say, but I really like the culture that Christianity creates. So even they're admitting there's some good fringe benefits to have Christian values, but now it does feel like we're all having our values hijacked and morphed into the political realm. And you could look back at, in American history too. I just think back over the last many decades, and I can remember over time organizations like they used to call themselves the moral majority, or names like Jerry Falwell. And I can remember at the time thinking, wait a minute, why are these religious people weighing in so heavily into politics? And ever since then, there's been this move towards conflating patriotism, conservatism, and Christianity, because they're kind of bedfellows, right? That Christians have a more conservative view, but that doesn't mean we want to be all about politics. And politics wasn't supposed to be about religion. It's not freedom of religion or from religion, but it is freedom to let people practice their religion. So why are we trying to hijack religion and combine a church and state kind of movement?
Well, that's true. And as you were speaking, I thought about the temptations of Jesus. Satan's, came to Jesus in the wilderness, and one of the things he tempted him was, he said, "If you will fall down and worship me, I will give all these kingdoms of the world." That he showed Jesus, "I'll give them to you if you'll fall down and worship me." And Jesus basically, he said no, he used scripture, but Jesus never refuted Satan's claim to have all the kingdoms of the world. And so we cannot take them all back, which is what the Seven Mountains mandate is doing, until Jesus' second coming, and he puts everything under his feet at that point. The systems of the world are basically under Satan's control overall. Now, as individuals, we don't have to be. And there are pockets of things that are, not under Satan's control. But there's nowhere in Scripture that tells us to conquer all these things before Jesus returns. But that is exactly what the Seven Mountains Mandate people are trying to do. And I'll just read a little bit more here, quoting Lance Wallnow again, which he said, Charlie Kirk was more than a cultural warrior. He was the first fruits martyr of a rising generation confronting darkness in education, media, and government. In other words, Lance Wallnow was espousing Charlie Kirk and Turning Point USA as spearheads of his, which I believe unscriptural Seven Mountains mandate theology. And that's the thing. Lance Wallnow was the big pusher of the Seven Mountains going way back. That's his whole drive. And Charlie Kirk, people will say, was Charlie Kirk really pushing the Seven Mountains mandate or whatever himself? Well, let me just quote from Charlie Kirk himself. In 2020, at a CPAC meeting, Charlie Kirk said regarding Donald Trump, finally we have a president that understands the seven mountains of cultural influence. Mm-hmm. So there you go. Charlie Kirk was basically espousing the Seven Mountains mandate then. Now, like I say, I'm not here to disparage Charlie Kirk, and there's a lot that he said that was absolutely great, But you can have a lot of absolutely great and still have some theological error which takes people off down on the wrong tangent. Whether he willingly did it or not, who knows? I'm not going to say. But then we get to Erica Kirk. And you were talking about Jesuits. Before I go on, I'll go again, Eric. I'll just grab your thoughts.
Well, yeah. I mean, there's so many directions we could take this. You said the biggest thing of all, just to remember, right, that the whole world lies under the power of the evil one. So whatever we see going on is from there. Let's put Erica to the side for a second. We'll definitely get back to her. But even just this idea that. We get fed these lines. And another thing I take note of is, for your average rank and file Christian, the idea of Christian values taking hold and maybe infiltrating into government sounds good at first, right? Yeah. But then, when you think it through, what's one of the major models that the powers that be use? Problem, reaction, solution, right? Absolutely. So I think what we're seeing is decades of building the problem today. So what am I talking about? I'm talking about in the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, they were churning and shifting society so that values were heading in a very leftist movement. And they pushed that pendulum so far to the left that now, people don't even know what the proper gender, what the two genders are, and the whole LGBT trans and all this stuff. And so it's gone past people's ability to cope and handle it and common sense. So once you push the pendulum so far one way, you're going to expect the reaction to be swinging back the other way. So that's what we're in the midst of, right? This huge rush to return to Christian values. And so the pendulum was deliberately pulled that far in one way. It didn't naturally go that way. And now they're taking advantage of the pendulum swinging the other way. So as it swings the other way, you're going to have this reaction in the other direction. It's going to seem good at first to common sense or conservative Christians that feel like finally we can stop with all the DEI and all this crazy gender stuff and we can get back to where we want to be. But as the momentum shifts, that's going to be their way to accomplish things they wouldn't have accomplished otherwise. You're not going to get agreement on all this mass surveillance and all if the Christians in power aren't, or at least those that think they're Christian, are getting swept up in this. We're also swept up in this positive seeming stuff, like, Christianity being celebrated in Washington, D.C. We're being distracted and blinded to everything else that's going to get ushered in with it. Not to mention another angle to look at. If you're Satan and the Christian view is the proper one, who are you needing to deceive? You don't need to deceive the already deceived. You don't need to deceive the non-believers and the leftists. You don't need to deceive people who aren't in the Christian faith. The target audience that needs to be deceived are Christians, or at least would-be Christians, or maybe baby Christians, or people that are in that realm. Those are the ones that, if it's possible to deceive even the elect, they'll try. So again, you touched on so many things before I'm trying to react to. So we've got, this appearance of Christianity, and we got these different voices that are all talking about it. And, another thing in our circles of end times watchers and all that is people keep trying to find out who's the Antichrist, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's worth talking about the word Antichrist, because most people think it means opposite. So if I say to most people, the opposite of love is what?
Hate. Yeah.
That's what most people say. But I often say, actually, it's indifference.
Yeah.
Because if you hate someone, that's actually, maybe you're just emotionally angry, but if you're indifferent to someone's plight, yeah, that's totally the opposite of love. But people don't think that way, right? So when it comes to, faith and all, what's the opposite of Christ? Well, someone would say Antichrist. But the reality is Antichrist means in place of. Yeah. It doesn't mean the opposite. So think about that. When we say something's held in place of, what would that have to mean? That would have to mean it's a close facsimile. It will appear to be Christ, only it's not. It's like saying margarine is a close facsimile to butter. Butter's the real thing. Margarine is some fake concoction. Yeah. It'll do and smell and spread and taste a lot like butter, but it's fake. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, if you're going to pull off a deception, the Antichrist isn't going to seem wildly different. It's not going to be some red pitchfork carrying fellow and against a white, angel type. Yeah. It's going to be someone actually very similar. So we need, again, we're back to where we began. Deception is what we need to be watching out for at every level. So we're not looking for the opposite of Christ. We're looking for a close facsimile that's fake. And that's what all these religious movements kind of seem, is like they're talking Christian. So if you were trying to pull off a good fake Jesus, what would you do? You make sure that movement, that person, whatever, spouts a lot of Christian sounding words. And the weak-minded Christians who don't really know their Bible well, they'll get deceived, which, like you pointed out, when Jesus was tempted by Satan, not only did he tempt him with these various things, but he came at him with Scripture. And then Jesus had to counter with Scripture. So, and even Adam and Eve got tempted with just a slight variation of what God said. So all I'm trying to make the point is that deception is going to come not by something that seems opposite, something that seems really close and pretty good. And aren't we used to that in politics? It's like we just say, we joke around, well, we vote for the lesser of two evils. We'll settle for good enough. Do you remember, there's a quote, and you'd think by now I'd have it memorized, but this guy was like the first head of the United Nations. His name was Robert Spake. And you ever heard this quote? Let's see if I can remember it or not butcher it. I don't have it in front of me here. He says something like, given the, if someone would present to us, be he God or devil, someone who can solve our problems and pull us out of the economic morass that we find ourselves in, we will accept him, be he like devil or not. And that's a bad paraphrase of it. But basically, he's saying, if things are so bad and someone is presented that seems like they can be our Mr. Fix-It Man and solve it, we'll accept him. We don't care who he is. We don't care if he's the false Christ. We'll accept him. So that was a quote that the head of the UN said decades ago in the 60s or early 70s. And again, I think it gets to the state that the world powers that be have pushed the world into. Such growing chaos and anxiety that the people will accept something, especially if it's good enough. It kind of sounds Christian-y. Aren't we okay? And one last thing on this point, and then I'll stop here. Remember what Jesus said when people asked about the Antichrist? He said, they're asking what will be the signs, what will the Antichrist look like? And didn't he say, actually, there are many Antichrists that have already been released, or the spirit of Antichrist. So I guess the point is, there's lots of false movements that are out there, or the spirit of a false movement. So yeah, we shouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, and the reuniting of religions together, Protestants and Catholics. And then there also, I notice, there's a lot of lumping Mormonism with Christianity now as well, and which is another false cult. And, we're seeing a sort of an acceptance of all of this amongst Christian circles. It's like, oh, well, we're just joining up with these people. And I don't think you can be personally, I don't think you can be a Mormon and be a true Christian. It's too far off the spectrum of, Christianity. I do think there are people in the Catholic Church that are true Christians, even though I don't think the Catholic Church itself is true Christianity. I believe there are some real Christians in the Catholic Church. And so, but we have to be very careful, because I don't think the Catholic Church is as such as Christianity, or the Pope. He's not pushing true Christianity in any way, shape or form. So when we start having Protestants communing with these people and saying it's okay, and almost putting their seal of approval on false Catholic doctrines, it's scary stuff, And so I mean, yeah, I'll get your thoughts on that. Then we can continue on this, because with the Kirks, both Erica and Charlie, there's some questionable stuff around this, and I want to do some quoting again in a minute. But I'll get your thoughts again.
Oh, please do. I think you're dead on. And one little footnote on the Mormons. Do you remember in the news cycles, they go so quickly, there was a shooting and firebombing, I guess you could call it, of a Mormon church somewhere in the U.S. Not long ago. Yeah. And again, I don't want to claim conspiracy around every corner, but it's hard not to at least take a notice. And I thought, I wonder if this is going to touch off a whole series of church shootings, bombings, issues, maybe of a variety of different denominations. So again, keep the chaos going such that at some point there's going to be like, can we just say enough is enough? Let's all put down we're tired of fighting. Everyone's tired of fighting. Let's put down our objections and all just come together, under one umbrella. So who's going to do that? And I think in some ways, the tallest tent pole in the tent is the Catholic Church. And we're seeing it so much, like you said, with the Catholic things in this administration, and now this event coming up this weekend, and a lot of high profile people have converted to Catholicism. So I did a little reading up, and there are some things said just a year ago under Pope Francis, and then going back multiple encyclicals in the Catholic Church that sort of, you can see the hinting towards and the moving towards kind of a general acceptance. In other words, buried in their own encyclicals or doctrine statements are kind of what you might call loopholes into the Catholic version of Christianity, that someone, it's funny, when I read them here, it says, if by no fault of their own, they don't know about Jesus, but they're living a life according to their conscience, well, then they can probably, it says the word may believers, even the word may like you're letting them, or may like they could theoretically, develop a Christian faith, when actually the exclusivity of Christianity has been watered down. It's maybe welcome and open to all, but it does have exclusive claims, and then Jesus' own words, I am the way and the truth and the life. Nobody comes to the Father except through me. So that's a very exclusive claim. You can't, all roads do not lead to heaven and do not lead, but yet Rome wants to make it that way, it seems like. And there's even, have you ever heard of the concept of anonymous Christianity?
No. Don't think I have.
I haven't either, but it's buried in this article about it's a doctrine buried in Catholicism that says basically, like, if you're kind of acting Christian but you never knew, then maybe you can be, and you are. I mean, almost the old argument, which can't even exist anymore. Like, what if a person's born on an island and no one ever, evangelized that island, and they lived their whole life never hearing the gospel? Like, are they in or out, basically? And so, in some ways, that's what this is trying to be, a catch-all, I think, that says, if you just lead a good life, but you never, through no fault of your own. I'd love to ask the writers, so what do you consider fault of your own? It also even gets into a very workspace thing. Like, as long as you're doing good works, and now we're back to an argument I can't stand, I'm a good person. If I'm a good person, so you've basically eroded almost all distinctiveness of Christianity. And there's another doctrine in this. I'll shoot you this article from a company called bcworldview.org, and it even talks about how they've made a lot of loopholes for Muslims. Like, well, it's an Abrahamic religion, and if you're, it's like, where does it end?
Yeah, that's true. Yep. So basically, I was raised a Catholic. So, people say we're just Catholic bashing. Well, I grew up and I believed a lot of this Catholic stuff when I was a child and growing up and all of that. So I know how the Catholic Church works. I know the changes that have been in the Catholic Church in recent years too. And, so I'm not someone that's just coming from the outside that has no clue about it. But so I want to move on and carry on a bit more, and let's just look. We're talking about. Let's talk about the Kirks again. Sorry, like I say, I'm not here to specifically bash the Kirk, Charlie Kirk or Erica Kirk or whatever, but people need to see the deceptions and to see them for what they are. So Erica was more. Comes from Catholic365.com. Right. So this is from a Catholic website. Erica was more than a life partner to Charlie. She was a witness, a prayerful influence, someone who embodied Catholic faith daily. And Charlie, in those final days, made clear that her faith had left its mark. Just over a week before he was killed, Charlie had a personal exchange with Bishop Joseph Brennan of Fresno. During that conversation, he spoke about his Catholic wife and children, how he attended Mass with them, and then he said, "I'm this close to converting to Catholicism." Charlie also made public comments that revealed real openness to Catholic truth. He said, "Protestants often undervalue the Blessed Mother." Quote, "But let me first say, I think we as Protestants and evangelicals under-venerate Mary. She was very important. She was a vessel for our Lord and Saviour." So that's from Catholic365.com. Sorry, I'll just grab a drink of water.
And even the word venerate,
exactly. Yes. So then it says, "I think that we as evangelicals and Protestants, we've overcorrected. We don't talk enough about Mary. We don't venerate her enough." There's that word again. Mary was clearly important to early Christians. There's something there. In fact, I believe one of the ways that we fix toxic feminism in America is that Mary is the solution. But the Catholic version of Mary is not the same as the biblical version of Mary, unfortunately.
And look at that little bitty example, the problem, reaction, solution. So toxic femininity is a problem. We've got a solution for it. It's let's worship Mary some more. So you realize you created a problem, and now you're gonna give us, foist on us your solution.
Yeah, true.
Isn't that convenient?
Absolutely. Okay, so who is Erica Kirk? Okay, the wife of Charlie Kirk. Erica Kirk was born Erica Lane Franceville, a devout Catholic whose faith deeply influences her roles as a wife, mother, and leader in conservative Christian circles. She married Charlie Kirk in 2021, sharing a commitment to Ephesians 5 marriage, emphasizing mutual love and submission, rooted in Catholic theology. That's from another Catholic website, by the way. So when you were talking about Jesuits in government, this is kind of my last thing, and then I'll really let you run. There's a small Jesuit school in Denver that has quietly become a pipeline for powerful Republicans surrounding Donald Trump. And this comes from an article at yahoo.com. A Catholic university nestled in the Rocky Mountains has quietly produced a surprising number of figures who now occupy influential positions within President Donald Trump's political sphere and the broader conservative movement. Regis University, a 148-year-old Jesuit institution in Denver, has become an unexpected common denominator among conservative leaders who've shaped American politics for decades. The connection includes two women. Now, there's a whole lot more people in this article, but I'm just going to read these two. The connection includes two women in Trump's orbit currently making headlines. Erica Kirk, the new CEO of Turning Point USA following her husband Charlie Kirk's assassination, and Lindsay Halligan, Trump's nominee for U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia. Both earned degrees from Regis. Erica Kirk was a student there from the fall of 2007 to the fall of 2009. So there you got Erica Kirk, Jesuit, trained, basically, educated. So that's pretty much where I wanted to go, and I'll let you carry on from there.
Well, and even more about her, it's almost like she's been first to like theological finishing school. Then I'm sure you've seen all the business about she was a model and an actress, and she was Miss Colorado from Denver at the beauty pageant hosted by Donald Trump's organization. I mean, there are so many connections. It's like they really picked a really well-trained wife for Charlie Kirk. And it's interesting now, she's the CEO of Turning Point, and will, I'm sure be a spokesperson and the spokesmodel, and knows how to get up and deliver a line. And I mean, let's just be honest here. I mean, anyone who watched those memorial services couldn't help but be struck by how scripted and staged it felt, and professional almost, and didn't seem genuine. A genuine wife grieving the sudden, unexpected, horrific, violent loss of their spouse would have behaved differently.
You would think
that already is kind of odd, but there's just so many things that make you go, and when you trace where they all come from, it just raises more questions than you would expect to find, to need to be raised. And we can't prove any of this, so we're not going to say any of this stuff. We don't want to just, besmirch someone's character or say something's totally fake. But man, there's just so many things that don't seem to play out. And, as we speak, today is October 7th, at least it is here in the U.S. And so we know what happened on a certain October 7th, and that had a lot of questions and things that made you go, and that seemed kind of odd. And, I link, when I watched the whole Kirk thing unfold, it just gave me flashbacks to something we call Eargate, what happened to Donald, and, similar things like, why is the crime scene being tampered with? Why is the alleged victim being rushed into an SUV? Where's all the video? I mean, so many questions, the sound of the gunshot. So we won't go into all that, but there's just so many things that make you go, And so I know we don't want to keep this too long. I think we're already over a half hour. So I'll bring in the one thing that I wanted to also bring in, and maybe you can flash this from your website. There's an article written about a year and a half or a year and a quarter ago, and it was right after the assassination attempt on Donald Trump. And I don't mean to sound like, aren't I great? But I wrote that article, and it was basically talking about the film, American film called The Truman Show. And it seems like I'm just talking about a movie, but believe me, I'm not talking about a movie. I'm showing all the comparisons that in this fictitious show, which, we've heard a lot about predictive programming in different films and TV shows, but there's another thing which goes on, which is called revelation of the method. So it's almost like the powers that be are showing you how they're doing things, or a magician might show you how he pulls off a trick. So he's revealing the method. So I would argue that The Truman Show might be a little of both, but I think it's more revelation of the method. So briefly, if you haven't seen The Truman Show, I definitely recommend watching it. But the article, go on Tony's website, you can search for that article and read it fresh. And as I did, I'm rereading my own words from a while ago. And I was like, wow, this could be written today. Just change the set of venues I'm comparing to, and suddenly the Charlie Kirk event seems a lot like The Truman Show, even more so, because Erica Kirk is very similar to the wife on The Truman Show, which is a character named Meryl. But just to kind of flesh out, in case you're not going to read that article, The Truman Show was an entire movie that was based around a fictional reality TV show where there was one man, Truman, his name was Truman Burbank, which is another California, movie term. So even his name was fake. It was Truman Burbank. He was raised in a movie studio from the time he was a baby, and they constructed this entire false world. It was an island with water and lights and sun, and they could literally control everything. Cue the sun, cue the weather, which, we do have weather modification, right? So it was basically this this movie studio that was the largest studio ever created, and you could see it from space. But basically, Truman was the one person being deceived, and all the other actors in his world were deceivers. They knew it. They were all paid to be there, down to including the woman that played his wife. And so the whole film seems at first like this fairy tale. Like, could they really do that? Could they keep a man up until I think he was in his early 30s, and he never realized he was living in an entirely fake world because everyone else was acting, but he started to wake up. Of course, that's one of the narratives around Charlie Kirk, right? That he started to wake up, maybe. And that's why someone needed to make sure he didn't wake up fully and spill any beans. But all that to say, the film not only has the character Truman and the wife that's paired with him and plays, and how it's all fake, and they're basically deceiving everyone until Truman finally goes on a journey of discovery, and he realizes, I've been lied to all around me all this time. Even the people I thought were my trusted friends, like his best friend and spouse and his mother-in-law, like they're all lying to me. I mean, can you imagine? That's the mind-blowing part of the film, right? Is that the realization that you wake up one day and maybe the medical establishment isn't all it was, and the political establishment isn't all it was, and all the heads of our 7 pillars, maybe they've been lying to us, right? Yeah. So we're like Truman in that regard. And then what's really powerful about the show is they interview one other character. His name is Christoph. Isn't that an interesting name? Christoph. So it's like Christ, but off.
Yeah.
And really, he turns out to be the Antichrist type Satan figure, because he is the power that controls the whole world. And he literally does. He can cue the sun and cue the characters. He's controlling Truman's entire world. And he gets interviewed during a little news interview about the show. And they ask him, how is it you've kept Truman in the dark all these years? And he has this classic line that says, "We accept the reality with which we are presented." And I'm like, boom.
Yeah.
So in other words, if we can present a lie in a convincing way through media and other actors that are paid to behave a certain way, people will accept it.
Yeah.
And my final dismount from the Truman Show is at the end. Well, I won't spoil it, how it ends and how, it kind of gets out of his false belief. But it's like, when I view the movie studio as they portray it in the film, to me, it looks kind of like a beehive, like a honeycomb hive, and Truman's in it. And so it's all happening inside the beehive. Isn't there a term we've heard occasionally with these New Age religion types and all, that we're approaching the externalization of the hierarchy?
Yes. Yeah.
I don't even fully know what that means, but I presume, and correct me if you have a better idea of this, like something's been going on hidden, maybe in like a hive, and now we're turning it inside out and we're externalizing it. And everything that was like in a microcosm, we're going to do it in a macrocosm. Like the whole world is going to be, brought under, this deception. And now bringing it all back, right? 7 mountains, the areas of influence, the World Economic Forum. We're going to have a one world government, a one world currency. And what I think we're trying to zero in on this episode here, the one world religion. Yeah. You tie all those together, and let's not forget what got built during COVID over in Abu Dhabi, right? Yeah. The 3-building Abrahamic campus. Yeah. That's sort of like trying to bring the 3 major, at least the Abrahamic religions together.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's true. The media is obviously used to control people's thoughts and get people focused on what they want. Like you don't hear about the Christians being slaughtered in Nigeria. Hundreds of thousands of Christians in the last few years have been killed off by Boko Haram and other Muslim extremists. But you don't hear about that. It's not important, Let's focus on Gaza instead, or the Ukraine, and how we've got to, defeat Putin or whatever. And then Trump's talking about giving Putin, giving Ukraine and Zelensky Tomahawk missiles, which is like, you do that, that's it, roadmap for World War III. But the mainstream media doesn't cover any of that, the implications of it. It's like they just get you believing what they want you to believe and focusing on what they want you to focus on. And unfortunately, most people are buying into it, including Christians.
The media is their mouthpiece, right?
Yeah.
And, I think one of my other articles was titled The Prince of the Air Waves, the airwaves. In other words, Satan speaks through the airwaves, and that's how he can kind of mimic the ubiquity of communication. He may not be all powerful and omniscient, but they're trying with all the surveillance and all that. But the media has been the means of shaping society. And, Americans are classically, self-focused, know nothing about what's going on in the world. Well, part of it is we don't get fed much. And I only watch our media to see, like, okay, what kind of nonsense are they feeding us today? So I can try and figure out, like, what are they covering up? Where is this going? So I do pay attention to, like, what gets covered. And what surprised me, again, back to the Charlie Kirk thing, we saw like a 1 million man march in the streets of London. And I'm like, first off, we don't ever get London news, not much.
Right, yeah.
But when they bother to show it, I'm like, oh, this fits your agenda. And of course, then you got to wonder, like, were there really 1 million Brits that got fired up about this Charlie Kirk thing and so quickly? And so, I mean, that's another thing to take note of. Like, how did 1 million British people even care about this and get motivated to leave their house and demonstrate? Like, is this real? Or is it CG? I don't know.
Well, the other thing is they give you that in the media. You see that, but how much coverage is there over the fact that Britain has had like around about 3 million people sign a petition against their digital ID that the British, they're being foisted on the people over there, and the government don't care what the petition says. They're marching forward with the digital ID. Just like under COVID, it's like, forget what the masses want, what they say, this is the agenda, we're doing it. It's not the politicians serving the people, it's the people who have to serve the government, basically. And so, they're marching forward with this. And then Donald Trump's with the real ID and all of these other things, AI and stuff that Trump is pushing. And that's all being rolled in with this Christian nationalism. And so it's like, no, folks need to really realize being a Christian does not mean you have to align yourself with the Republican Party. You don't align yourself with the Democrats either, obviously, and the leftist agenda, but it's like time to separate Christianity from politics in your own minds if you haven't already done so. And many people haven't. They've like got this, we've got to back Donald Trump no matter what kind of attitude if you're in America, regardless of the fact that it's pushing us into the beast system. And I could go on.
Well,
and
if
on.
you're a Christian, you better. Yeah, I mean, the implication is if you're a real Christian, you better back Donald Trump. You better follow the Charlie Kirk narrative. And like you say, the media is not only deciding what we get to see and what we don't, but what really struck me at watching the Kirk coverage is not only are they dictating what we get to see and get to know and are fed, but it was dictating even our emotions. It was telling us how we're supposed to properly react. And boy, was rage was being pushed in a big way. And I thought, wow, you're just churning up emotionalism. Then you're going to churn that emotion in with faith, which actually there's not much place for rage. Jesus said, vengeance is mine. In other words, back off. You're not supposed to be that angry or be driven by rage. But yeah, the media just hypes up the masses, and in some cases hypes up the Christians. And that's in some ways my biggest concern is, like, I don't want to see Christians or would-be Christians deceived by this, and non-Christians for that matter. But, it just seems like there's a targeting to this particular round of deception. And like we started off, what's coming, what's happening this week? Apparently a mile-long Eucharist. Yeah. Really?
Yeah, exactly. So
it'd be interesting if cover that, I wonder if there'll be like some news truck rolling along and showing like, okay, here's Muslims having communion, and here, is it going to be more? You know what I'm saying? Like, are they going to just show a cornucopia of different faiths all coming together? Won't surprise me.
We'll have to see, I guess, wait and see. But yeah, so I guess we've got to focus on the true gospel, focus on praying for discernment and basing it on the scriptures and not on mega churches and self-appointed apostles and prophets and people that are pushing this non-biblical seven mountains mandate, which is a cult as far as I'm concerned. It's a kind of a cultic Christian belief system. So I guess we'll let it wrap up there unless you've got any final thoughts you want to bring. And I will pump links to your articles with this. People can go back and read that Truman Show article and the Airwaves article as well.
Yeah, it's exciting time. Thanks for having me on again today. I think this kind of refocus on the deceptions, especially around a one world religion, and just the idea of, the Antichrist is not the opposite. We got to get that out of our thinking. Anti, in this case, means similar, in place of, a reasonable facsimile that will deceive the masses. So there's another thing to be watching out for. Anything that smells a lot like Christianity but actually isn't, which reminds us what? Get back into your Bible. Know the truth. Know the facts. I think they used to train bank tellers how to spot fake currency and forgeries. They didn't demonstrate how. Let's investigate all the fake ways to produce a dollar bill. They would say, just study the genuine article. That way, when a fake one passes in your hand, you'll just almost know it intuitively. Like, doesn't pass the sniff test, doesn't pass the I'm looking at it at a different angle. So I think that's probably the message to Christians, is just know your authentic Jesus, not the fake one that might be pushed down your throat.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for being with me again today, Eric. That was a good discussion, I believe.
Enjoyed it as always. Thanks so much.
Cheers. Folks, don't forget our website is aminutomidnight.com. Make sure you subscribe to us there by going down the right-hand side of the page where it says subscribe to blog. A Minute to Midnight's run 100% by donations. A big thank you to all the folks that do help us. If anyone wants to donate to A Minute to Midnight, there is a donation page at our website, aminutomidnight.com, with various ways you can donate there. And as I say, much appreciated. And the music used I've written, played and recorded. God bless, and God willing, we will be back with another episode in a few days' time.